Hello, everyone. It is Hawk, and welcome back to Hawk Tau. It has been a minute, I know. I sort of took a bit of a month break from competitive Warhammer. I was a little bit burnt out and just sort of busy with work and other things. So it's been a minute, I know. Thank you so much to everyone that gave me such a warm welcome and reception on my first video. A lot of people thought it was insightful or entertaining and messaged me to say that it was, and it really meant a lot to all the kind comments. I really, really appreciate you. And so I'm excited to continue making more content. I'm excited to dive back into competitive Warhammer. Yesterday, I played at a practice teams RTT in preparation for the California Team Championship, where I will be playing and representing my team Githammer. And I'm going to talk about that today for you all. Now, for the second time, I recorded this entire video and realized my Epic Pen wasn't working. So we're going to maybe do it a little bit quicker this time around, but I wanted to make sure you all get the best experience. If you are new to the channel, or, well, we kind of all are, it's only my second video, I would appreciate if you guys subscribe. I'm going to try to upload a little bit more, both as far as after action reports, but also I'm working on some high effort, like video essay style of content that I just don't really think exists in the Warhammer 40k space right now, and I'm really excited to try out. I'm hoping I have my first video of that style up maybe sometime next week, depending on how long it takes me to edit. I've already written and recorded the entire script. It's about anti-tank data sheets and sort of looking at the math and comparing and contrasting some of the pros and cons. And I think it's going to be a really cool video for a lot of people, especially Tau players, of course. So be sure to check that one out when it comes out. But thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for watching. Let's go ahead and talk about the February 9th Teams Practice RTT that I just played in. And given that I am playing in teams, I am playing a bit of an offbeat Retaliation Cadre list. I want to try some different things so I can really get information about different matchups and our own data sheets so that I can build the best list possible to function in a team's environment. This one that I played yesterday, lovingly entitled Swim Sideways, because I have brought back the Riptides in a meta where everything is so consistently able to kill whatever it wants. I'm looking at +1 to wound Oath of Moment Space Marines and Bridgehead Guard, the new Eldari Codex. You know, there are so many armies that can just look at something and delete it. I sort of just thought to myself, what happens if I bring a 4-up Invuln and just make that math all of a sudden less consistent and make my opponents think twice about what they are and are not able to kill? And that was sort of the thought process behind this entire list, was bringing the Riptides for that reason. So to run through everything else, I brought a Commander and Enforcer Battlesuit with the Starflare Ignition System. This is exactly the same as in my previous army. Triple Missile Pod, Cyclic Ion Blaster. He's going to be attached to the Fire Knives, hopping up and down, solving problems for me, and being able to threaten my opponents where I need him to. I had a Commander and a Cold Star Battlesuit with the Prototype Weapon System. He was equipped with 4 Meltas to go with one of the Sun Forges. I have another Cold Star Commander, the DACA Commander. I love this guy. High output Burst Cannon, Double Burst Cannon, and Cyclic Ion Blaster. Going with a unit of Burst Scythes. Double Gun Drones as well for 53 shots of DACA. Strength 6, AP 2, damage 1, but 53 shots, y'all. You just force a ton of saves, clear out hordes, and also surprisingly effective against elite infantry as well, as we'll discuss later. Triple stealth suits, single unit of Vespid, and single Pathfinders are very standard. I brought a Crutox Rider, which we'll sort of talk about this decision in a little bit, but I love this little action monkey, 40-point dipshit that I can throw his life away and force a response from my opponent. I think it's pretty good, personally. So good that I elected him to take him instead of Broadsides, or a third Riptide, or the internal grenade racks, any things like that. Instead, I brought a second unit of Crisis Sunforged Battlesuits with no Commander, which is not something I've typically run, or, well, actually, not something I've ever run. I've never run Commanderless Sunforges. The idea behind this decision is that between the Riptides and the Ghostkeel and the Commanderless Sunforges, I can deal with medium to light vehicles very effectively. Anything like T10, 12 wounds, you know, like I can pair up those activations. Even though I'm not forcing a ton of saves, they have very high damage, right? Riptide flat 4, Ghostkeel flat 3, Sunforges D6 +2 re-rolling, right? it just does a lot of damage. So I figured I'd be able to handle medium vehicles while the big Sunforge bomb can take out all the really big stuff. Especially with the meta being a little bit more horde oriented at this point, I didn't love the idea of bringing broadsides. I also just kind of wanted to try something different. I'm still not sold on if this is the way to go. It was just the decision I made. I wanted the Krutox Rider, and I didn't really love the idea of just 2 broadsides, so I tried this. Again, I'm just sort of experimenting, practicing for my list building for CTC. 2 units of Kroot Carnivores, a bit of another eccentricity with this list. Most Retaliation Cadre builds only bring 1. Some bring 2 Vespids. I brought 2 Kroot Carnivores, guys. You have 20 OC that you can now put on your natural, and you can still sticky your home if you do it. That's something I've sort of had issues with in the past, is if you sticky your home with the Kroot, where do they go next? In some matchups, there's not a lot of good places. The best way to use them is denying your opponent 5 primary, but what if I can do both? What if I can have that 20 OC on my natural and still have that extra unit of Kroot that can kind of do whatever I want it to do? I thought that was an interesting idea. It also enhances the matchup against melee armies, as do the Riptides as well, by the way, because they just don't fucking die. So I kind of liked bringing them. And that was the idea behind that. And then 2 units of Star Sights, like I said, one of them is a burst cannon unit, and the other one, Flamers. They go commanderless as well. I've talked about this unit in the past, but a really great cheap trading unit that you can most of the time bring out a deep strike to just solve problems for you. Whether it's like a rapid ingress Overwatch threat into melee armies, or you can attack your opponent's natural objective very well by deep striking behind and clearing them out with a shortened blade. To deny 5 primary. They can be thrown away in the middle of the board as just a response piece at only 110 points. You don't really have to care if they die, and they're effective enough that they can usually trade out for scoring, and they're really good at attacking that aspect of the game against most armies. So I really like this unit. I think they're better without a commander, actually, because of how cheap and expendable they become. And then I had a Ghost Kill. I love the Ghost Kill. They're really good on Search and Destroy, which, funnily enough, CTC, no Search and Destroy. So, wondering if maybe it's a Ghost Kill-less army for me, but regardless, that's not the only reason they're here. The Infiltrate obviously is nice, but y'all, they just demand very concrete responses from the opponent, right? With the Lone Operative and the fact that they just don't really die to anything that's not a very strong activation, they're really good at asking the opponent questions that they must respond to very concretely, otherwise they lose points or they won't kill the Ghost Kill, right? So I think it's just great for that reason at sort of helping you force trades, which of course the Retaliation Cadre detachment, so good at playing the trading game because you can force responses from your opponent, kill the response, and then fire and fade behind cover. With double Riptide as well, they might not even kill you back if you don't fire and fade, right? And so it's really, really interesting play pattern. I think the Ghost Kill helps facilitate that very well. But yeah, everything's pretty standard. All the loadouts are generally what you would expect. Ions on the Riptides and the Ghost Kill, Melta secondaries. Yeah, that's really the only loadout decisions I suppose to make. Pathfinders have Ions. I don't think they shot once the entire day, by the way. They're not there to shoot, but Ions are better than railguns. Yeah, that's the list, guys. I think this list was interesting. I'm not sure, like I said, if this is necessarily the way to play Retaliation Cadre Tau right now, but it is at least a way. I did think the Riptides were very effective. I think you still should consider Riptides in Retaliation Cadre Tau if you are a Tau player. I think people saying that they are bad are off base. I think it's totally fair to say they are maybe not the optimal choice in all lists. I think it depends on what you're trying to do, but I do think they absolutely have a place. I think they performed very well. And I'm excited to kind of keep experimenting with them and seeing if they are the answer for me at CTC. Before we dive in, though, to the first game, I want to talk a little bit about the teams format, because some of you might be listening to this video and wondering, what is teams? What does teams actually mean? And so this is a 5-man teams tournament, CTC. I've also played 8-man teams in the past, and basically the way it works is the scoring is based on, for the round, based on how well your team does in their matches against the opponent's team across the board. And there's a whole pairings process if you play like League of Legends or Dota. It's sort of like the pick and ban phase almost. Even like Smash has like map picks and bans, right? Where you say, okay, here's our 5 players and our armies and our lists, and here's the opponent's 5 players and armies and lists. And there's a whole pairing process where you pair each of the 5 players into one person from the opposing team. And then you play a game of Warhammer. And the way that the scoring works then is there are 20 points up for grabs in each game for a total of 100 across the round. As a team, you need 55 points to win. And as an individual, a match is scored off of intervals of 5. So a quote-unquote draw, a close game, is a 10-10, and you need to win by 6 or more to start tipping the scales, and every 5-point interval thereafter is another point in your favor. So let's say I win a game 88-85. I've won this game if it is a singles GT. However, that is not how teams work. That would still be a 10-10 draw because I did not beat my opponent by more than 5 points. However, let's say I won 88-80. That would then become an 11-9 in my favor because I won by more than 5, but less than 11, right? And so you can see how the 5-point intervals kind of stack up from there. And we'll sort of look at that a little bit later, but that's sort of how it works. And if you've never played teams before, I highly recommend it. It kind of, like I'm sort of talking about, allows you to think about list building differently. You're not always just trying to tech for what is the best in the meta right now, and I have to be able to beat everything. But you can sort of just build a little bit more of a skew list, something a little bit more offbeat that people just might not be as prepared for, and take advantage of that in pairings. Maybe you can hunt different stuff that your teammates aren't able to deal with as well. Given that I am a Tau faction specialist, I can only play Tau, but I can tailor my list to do certain things that my team might need me to do still, and I can contribute to the pairings process that way. And so that's something that's really important for me and sort of why I'm trying different, more offbeat stuff heading into CTC. But with all that being said, let's talk about the matches. First game against a Michael, representing 4 Horsemen Conquest, playing Vanguard Onslaught Tyranids. Bit of a strange list for Michael. He was running 3 units of Gene Stealers, all with Brood Lords attached. He had 2 Mawlocks, which I have never seen before. They deep strike and they drop mortals when they drop in to things near them. And they can be picked up in Vanguard Onslaught. They're like T10, 14, 16 wounds maybe, 12 wounds. I don't know. They had a number of wounds. Really, really weird unit. I've literally never seen it before. He had 1 Winged Hive Tyrant. He had 2 Exocrines, a Tyrannofex, a unit of Hormagaunts, a Neurotyrant, and a Biovore, and like 2 Lictors. I think that was the whole list. And so immediately off the bat, things I noticed about this list is that 3 units of Gene Stealers, they want to come at me hard and fast. I need to be able to screen those out. I need to not get alpha striked by the Gene Stealers. I need to create stable battle lines. And I should be in a pretty comfortable position because of reason number 2, not that much shooting damage at all in this Tyranids list. Double Exocrine, single Tyrannofex, not really going to be able to do too much to Riptides and Ghost Keels. Even Crisis Suits, they're going to take damage from the Exocrines, and the Tyrannofex will be able to blow away a suit or 2, but with the Invulns on the Sunforges, Armor of Contempt on my Fire Knives, like, my opponent just does not have that much ability to dictate firing lanes, and if they're dropping their big bugs and their Gene Stealer bricks in the middle of the board, I'm going to be able to pop out and kill them without really fearing much retaliation. Of course, this is not Invasion Fleet either, so I don't need to be worried about lethals like enhancing the damage. And I think in general, a massive lack of damage in my opponent's list if the Gene Stealers are not able to get in and do what they want. So how does that inform my deployment? Well, I did a very standard deployment with like the, Ghost Keel here. I'm putting Stealth Suits down here. Kroot Carnivores on the line. I got some Kroot, like, I think they're more over here on the line. I got my Krootox Rider, which I do think is a mistake, by the way. I think I started all 3 of my Stealth Suits on the board, which we'll talk about in a moment. I think I'm supposed to start my Krootox Rider off the board when I do that with my Stealth Suits. Reason being is it gives me that little 40-point guy I can bring in on the side later in the game to do actions. I think he just sort of didn't have a role on turn 1 in this game. So this is something to keep in mind for me as I play in the future, and maybe for yourself as well. I had my Riptides behind the big ruins. You'll notice this Riptide kind of in the open. Again, I don't really need to fear the shooting, especially when my opponent deploys their Exocrines back here and back here, meaning that there's only a couple firing lanes. The Tyrant effect started off the board. There's only a couple firing lanes that I actually have to respect. I started my Flamers on the board, which is something I don't usually do, but I wanted to be able to have a threat of like Overwatch and also just being able to have a cheap Gene Stealer effective killer on the board that I could use if my opponent really wanted to come at me hard and fast on turn 1. It sort of helps dissuade that a little bit. I had the DACA Commander back here, able to play for the middle of the board or my natural, depending on what my opponent, decides to attack. And my Fire Knives down over here such that they can dictate this firing lane should my opponent want to push their Gene Stealers up the board. Bases are too big to be able to fit here and not be seen by this unit. General game plan is just to kill the Gene Stealers. This unit and this unit are absolutely the most important to be able to go after the Gene Stealers with. They can somewhat reliably, with the sustained 2 enhancement, full kill a unit of Gene Stealers and the Broodlord in a single activation, which is awesome. And so that's sort of what you're after with these 2 units as the Tau pilot. And sort of, I was hoping to get my opponent to come forward with the Gene Stealers and then be able to kill them back. Excuse me. And that was basically what happened. I was able to win the Defender role, which is huge because it means I can get the first screen with my Infiltrator. So I immediately deploy my Stealth Suits 9 back from my opponent's deployment zone like this to make it such that my opponent cannot scout anywhere in here. It is a huge bubble, the part of their DZ closest to me that can no longer scout forward and apply pressure to my natural expansion objective. We were playing Scorched Earth, which means as long as I can score my 10s, I'm in a really, really good position. Not only that, I was able to put my Pathfinders somewhere around here, such that, again, I'm just creating a wall that the Gene Stealers don't really want to crash into. And without that much shooting, again, there's not really that much my opponent can do about this issue. They have to commit something into it to kill them. And if they want it to be the Exocrines, well, I can maybe kill them back with my Riptides, with my long-range shooting, or with a Deep Strike on turn 2. So all things that my opponent has to think about and really respect. So I am in a really good position off the bat from the Defender role. Not only that, I'm in a great position after turn 1 because I am also going second on Scorched Earth, meaning I can get the big burn at the end of the game for the extra 5 points in primary. And I'm thinking I'm already in a position to score an 11 because I've been able to effectively screen my opponent and going second on Scorched Earth. I'm just super comfortable. I can now sit back and do nothing and force my opponent to make mistakes. And mistakes, unfortunately, were made. Like I said, Exocrines deployed super defensively, meaning that I don't really have to respect them on any of these firing lanes whatsoever. Gene Stealers scouted to here, and scouted to here. And you will notice that these Gene Stealers are very far from doing anything of consequence. This is not a realistic charge that I would ever give. Where are they going? Into the middle of the board to stand there and die, right? I'm not going to put anything valuable here. I'm just waiting for you to come out so I can kill you, right? And so immediately, top of turn 1, my opponent does not apply pressure to me with their Gene Stealers, I think, in the way that you need to, especially if you're going first on Scorched Earth against Tau. And I've realized I think I'm in a position to win the game. Not just get that 11-9 that I talked about, but I think I can get a 12 or better after turn 1 had transpired. A couple of other things happened that went my way. The Gene Stealers scouting a little defensively was a big one. The next thing is Winged Hive Tyrant came out to here. And his big wings mean that he is very, very visible. That was sort of my opponent's answer to the Cell Suit screen. Unfortunately, and I feel bad, I didn't catch this either. Michael was a really great opponent, really great guy to play against, and I just totally missed this. He didn't charge these Stealth Suits. He just brought out the Winged Hive Tyrant and kind of stood there. And I kind of was just focused on other stuff. I didn't notice. He never declared his intent to do so at any time. So unfortunately, those stealth suits survived, and the Winged Hive Tyrant with his little wings that I drew sticking out, he was visible from everywhere. At only T9, I can reasonably expect that Riptides and Ghost Kills should be able to deal with that problem. Not only that, the Mawlocks dropped in like here and here, and they dropped Mortals on my Pathfinders, which obviously does some damage, but I was able to pull this side of my Pathfinders. I ended up losing 5 to the Mortals on the drop. I pull my Pathfinders such that these ones are gone. This one can now no longer charge anything because it's out of range. This one needs to bomb a 9 and misses. So my Pathfinders survive with 5 guys alive. And now he's just got 3 bugs in the middle of the board with, again, not that much shooting to be able to back them up. The Gene Stealers being far away means I don't need to worry about getting charged either. So I am able to immediately deploy a gun line, and I think I'm in a very, very good position to win this game. On my turn, I did, in fact, bring my Ghost Keel up. I brought my Riptide up. I just poked this guy out such that he could see the Winged Hive Tyrant. I didn't even need to give the Exocrines a shooting angle. And something really funny happened here. I figured it would take all 3 of these guys combined to probably kill the Winged Hive Tyrant. Maybe grenades from the stealth suits, just because he's got an invuln. Like, he's kind of annoying to kill, despite only being T9. Yeah, this Riptide, I activated him, guided by Pathfinders, 4 hits. I roll my wounds. I need 4s to wound. 6s are devs because I'm popping my Nova Boost. I rolled 4 6s. That is 16 dev wounds. That is a dead Winged Hive Tyrant and a single Riptide activation. Was extremely funny, was extremely lucky. I think that Winged Hive Tyrant was dead no matter what, but it was pretty comical. And it was very unfortunate for my opponent. So this guy kind of just died like a bitch. And so he was no longer a threat. Not only that, my opponent only had the Lictor on their natural expansion objective. They were keeping their Gaunts back here, staging by their Gene Stealers. They had like Gene Stealers and Gaunts back here. So I was able to advance my Pathfinders, got a good advance roll, a 4 to move 11, get 1 Pathfinder on the objective. The Neuro Tyrant was not in position to overwatch, so I denied my opponent 5 primary that they were never going to get back. So to recap, I'm going second on Scorched Earth. I'm expecting to get +5 on primary at least no matter what. I've now denied an additional 5 primary. I have now killed one of my opponent's big bugs on turn 1, and I have lost virtually nothing for it. That was basically the dream turn 1 I could have gotten, and I immediately told my team captain I think I am in a position to win this game. From here, the game, I guess, proceeded about as you'd expect. These Gene Stealers committed forward into my Carnivores. They did manage to deny me this 5 points of primary heading into turn 3. Turn 3. They did not manage to deny me that those points of primary heading into turn 3. But Gene Stealers traded for Kroot. I was able to bring up the DACA commander around to completely kill them in that single activation with the sustain 2. So that is a massive, massive advantage for me. I had rapid ingress my Sun Forges such that, they rapid ingress back here such that it was unchargeable for the Mawloc in the middle of the board, and they were not visible to the Exocrines that were still sitting very far back in my opponent's deployment zone. They came up, they kind of whiffed into the Mawloc. Like, this is exactly the kind of profile I was hoping I would be able to hunt with the little unit of Sun Forges, because it's like a T10 thing that like doesn't get a save against my shots, and I only got 2 saves through, or 2 shots through, and so that wasn't enough damage. The Mawloc just has enough wounds to live that. I think mathematically I'm supposed to get 3 or 4 shots through, considering I'm wounding on 4s, re-rolling, no save, re-rolling damage. Like, it just really comes down to the hit roll, right? I just didn't, I got a little unlucky, only got 2 saves through. I did still kill this with like grenades and like Riptide shooting and all that fun stuff. It did mean that the other Mawloc that was back here, he did like the pick up and then drop them back in for Mortals thing. Meant that the other one back there lived on like 6 wounds. I was kind of hoping that would die, but ultimately it was fine. And so I was able to take my opponent, off this objective, which doesn't really matter in Scorched Earth, but I'm just at a huge material advantage, right? I'm going to score my 10 on turns 4 and 5, basically guaranteed now that these Gene Stealers are gone. all the other stuff is like down here, guys. The Tyrannofex is down here. He's lost his Winged Hive Tyrant. He's lost one Mawloc. One's at 6 HP. He's lost his Gene Stealers. Like, everything's just kind of gone at that point. So this objective is now going to be super safe. The rest of the game, I only get denied my natural once, which is an acceptable loss for me. And not only that, I can start thinking about how I'm going to pressure my opponent's home. Other important things that happen. My opponent's Fex did 9 damage to this Riptide on turn 2. And it did not kill me on turn 3. Because, so I went down to 5 wounds. It did 9 damage to me. I failed a hazardous summon. 2 wounds remaining. My opponent draws Bring It Down. And the beauty of 4-up invulns is Tyranids misses 1 shot, forces 1 save. I hit my 4-up invuln. And so he only got a 2 on Bring It Down by killing those Sunforges in the middle of the board. Everything else managed to survive. And it was a really controlled win for me. A 17-3 at the end of the day, well above the Matrix and expectation for myself. I did make a couple of small mistakes in the scoring department that I think I was supposed to get in a 18-2. First one was for no reason at all, I shot my Ghost Keel on turn 4 instead of just burning this objective. I kind of just, that was a brain fart. So that's just 5 points. I kind of just gave up. I was trying to kill like an Exocrine here, but like that Exocrine doesn't matter. I like charged it with my Riptide. So that was just kind of a pointless mistake that I made. And then also I had Secure No Man's Land, I believe on turn 3. And that 6 HP Mawloc that was sitting now in the middle of the board that had sort of like charged into my Sunforges and helped him Bring It Down. I threw a grenade at it with my Stealth Suits when it was on like 2 wounds remaining. And it died, but it meant that I couldn't get anything on this objective. I think what I was supposed to do, and I didn't have enough CP for Fire and Fade, which is an important distinction as well. It was like, I needed the CP to kill the Mawloc, otherwise it was going to live. I didn't have enough shooting, because I killed like the Tyrannofex with my Sunforges, and I like decimated these Gene Stealers and these Gene Stealers. Like I shot everything else except for this thing, right? So it lived on 2 wounds. I needed the CP to kill it. I don't have enough CP for Fire and Fade. What I was supposed to do is I was supposed to charge this Riptide into it and tank shock it. So that was a mistake that I made. Because I'm also realizing even if I don't kill it with the tank shock, like it's a Mawloc in combat with the Riptide. What the hell is it gonna do? So yeah, bit of a mistake there. So I gave up 8 points in terms of like singles speaking. It was 1 point in terms of teams. I think I was supposed to have an 18-2. Like I said, Michael was a really great opponent. He was a super nice guy to play against. Like, we had a lot of fun playing the game, and I really appreciate that. But ultimately, a really solid win for me and a great demonstration, I think, of actually what the Riptides can bring to the table. And not only that, a great demonstration of how to play against aggressive melee guys. Just screen their scouts. If you're playing against melee armies with scout moves, do some shit like this. They cannot get that far on turn 1 without their scout moves. So if they're charging your random bullshit in the middle of the board, oh my god, it's so good for you. Even better if they have light shooting, like my opponent did. Because, like, these Stealth Suits right here, man, they were never dying unless my opponent charged them. Which, that is already a great position to be in if you are the Tau player, because it means you can bring out your guns and shoot them. And kind of, if you will, you demand that they fire the gun first. And when you got the bigger gun, it's a really good thing. So, yeah, definitely think that's a great example of what Riptides can bring to the table, what you can do against melee pressure armies, and ultimately a very, very controlled and solid win for me to shake off the rust after about a month and a half break of playing Warhammer. But let's flip it on over to another mission. Still GW6, guys. You're going to notice a lot of games for me on teams are probably going to be on GW4 and GW6. Reason being, these maps are fucking awesome for Tau, okay? It's a really safe natural expansion objective that your opponent has to overcommit to get you off of into, like, firing lanes. And the middle of the board is wide open, meaning that you can play the trading game so well. Put your little dinky crude out in the middle, force responses from them, fire and fade behind cover. All of a sudden, you find yourself at a material advantage. It's a really, really good board for Tau, I think, and I'm typically defending, meaning I get map pick and my opponents are choosing what armies they want to play into me. So even though I don't get to choose my opponents as much, I get to choose my map, and I'm really happy to play on these layouts. Also, like the way that this natural is set up, if your opponent commits too far forward, you can deep strike behind them with like Star Scythe Flamers and take them off of it, deny 5 primary. Like, it's a really good way to play the game. So highly recommend this board layout in teams if you're a Tau player. I love it. And so, yeah, same layout. This time it's Tipping Point, Purge the Foe, Smoke, and Mirrors, I want to say. The other one was Inspired Leadership, by the way. It was Crucible Battle, Inspired Leadership, Scorched Earth. This one, Tipping Point, Purge the Foe, Smoke, and Mirrors. Neither mission rule really came up, but Purge the Foe, and I'm against Dark Angels. Ben from Dice Hammer Abides, a fellow Ben, another really fun opponent. Pretty solid Warhammer player. He was talking to me. He's typically a guard player. I could tell he really has his Warhammer fundamentals down pretty well. Definitely could tell he was not the most familiar with Dark Angels, though. His team asked him to play Dark Angels for this event. He was clearly having a blast doing it, but I could see some inexperience there, but still like a really good opponent as far as like just fundamentally a really solid Warhammer player. Definitely asked me difficult questions, and I think played a pretty solid game overall. And just a ton of fun, man. Me and him were having a blast. It's the second game of the day. Like we're just enjoying ourselves. And it's my first ever game against Dark Angels with Retaliation, Cadre, Tau. A matchup I've really been wanting to play against. A pretty popular pick, Dark Angels Gladius in teams. So one I'm really happy I got to play against before going to CTC. And low stakes for me in this game as well. So Ben and I are also matched up against each other in a team league, and so we played the game sort of for our team league. We're like, hey, if we pair into each other, let's just auto pair us as the opponents in this team's match, play for the team league. That way we get that done, right? And so the pressure was off for me. I was the last one to play my game, and literally no matter what I did, my team captain looked at me and said, Ben, just don't score -7 points, and we're gonna beat this team in the team league. And I said, great, that is impossible for me to do. So I could literally have gotten tabled on turn 1 and kind of pressure was off for this game. But like I said, still wanted to get some experience against Dark Angels. Another bit of an offbeat list, I think, for Ben, but still kind of had that quintessential Dark Angels Gladius vibe. Double Deathwing Knights, double Scout Marines, 1 unit of 5 JPIs, Azrael attached to a unit of regular intercessors, had a repulsor with 10 Hellblasters and a character inside. That was pretty funny and unexpected. He had Lionel Johnson with a combi weapon lieutenant following him around, and then also had a unit of 3 Inceptors and a unit of 3 Eradicators. Like I said, I think this is not the most meta Dark Angels list from my understanding, but look, I just wanted to find out if I could kill Deathwing Knights. That's it. So now I'm very familiar, and it was a lot of fun. Excuse me. Let's get into the deployment. My opponent won the defender role, so bit of a nuisance for me, but a key nuance that Ben did not realize was that on Tipping Point, and the reason I love this deployment so much as Tau, there's 2 reasons. 1, the deployment zones are very far apart from each other. It gives us more space to play with. Really easy to create battle lines, man. Well, it's more something like this, right? Really easy to create battle lines, which of course has the fragile shooting army we typically like. But not only that, Tipping Point, unlike all of the other deployments, the no man's land objectives are 7 inches away from the deployment zone, as opposed to 8. Meaning, Kroot, with their Scout 7 and Sticky, can Sticky 3 objectives, theoretically, on turn 1. And if we go first, right? And I think that is a key sort of part of playing against Tau on Tipping Point that Ben did not quite realize, a key nuance. And so he deployed a Scout Marine, something like this on his first drop, or maybe it was like this. One of these 2 was his first drop, the other one was his second, meaning my Scout moves were not screened out. He was just kind of playing to get behind the wall, and that meant I was able to sticky these 3 objectives. I ended up going first on turn 1. So, I had my Kroot, I had them on the line, like up here. I had my other Kroot over here, they were deployed here, and then I was able to string them out such that they were able to touch both these objectives. These guys were able to scout forward. Otherwise, my deployment was basically exactly the same as last game. Ghost Keel, Riptide, Riptide. I had my Fire Knives back here. I don't need to threaten this firing lane because my opponent does not have some big honkin' unit that they want to stage here. Deathwing Knights are literally too slow to get there on turn 1, and he can hide them fairly effectively. And also, like, unlike Gene Stealers, Fire Knives do not pose a substantial threat, so I'd rather play for middle of the board shooting on turn 1. Daka Commander, same thing. I want him to be able to go towards either the middle or the natural. His big job is to hunt Deathwing Knights. T5 means that the Strength 6 is very effective, and also AP2. Even though everything's only damage 1, it's not affected by the Deathwing Knights -1 damage. And you just force them to take like 25 4-up saves. Even though you're not going to kill the whole unit of Deathwing Knights in one activation, nothing is. And you can reasonably expect to kill like 3-ish if they don't Armor of Contempt, which is a lot. And that's really what you want out of this unit. So his main job, hunting Deathwing Knights and defending the objectives I want to play for. Yeah, I kept both Sunforges and Deep Strike again, of course. I kept the Flamers and Deep Strike this time, as well as one unit of Stealth Suits. That's typically sort of what I'm looking to do. So yeah, let's get into the game. Like I said, top of turn 1, I'm going first on Purge the Foe, which is much less than ideal. I don't think against an army like Dark Angels, I'm ever going to get a win in teams going first on Purge the Foe. However, a draw is what is expected of me in this matchup. I'm telling my team captain I can try to get a 10. Going second on Purge the Foe, which is theoretically a -8 primary deficit, is a 9 to 11. If I can make up 4 of those 8 points, it becomes that 10-10. I think I can fairly reliably achieve that. And so that is always my goal going into this game. And being able to scout on these objectives does mean I'm immediately threatening to hold more objectives. For that, 4 points of primary, which is a great position to be in, because if I can make up that 4 points right there, all of a sudden I can do nothing the rest of the game, basically, and take my 10-10 and be very happy with myself. So that's sort of what I'm looking for. And if my opponent wants to come out here, that's when I can start attritioning their scoring and force them into bad situations. So let's talk through some of the critical things that happened in the first couple of turns. I'm going to be honest, a couple of mistakes on both sides. So turn 1, I draw Establish Locus, and I retreated my Crew Carnivores off the objective because I just don't need them there, right? They're already stickying. I know I'm probably not going to hold that objective, but even so, I don't need OC on the board. I just want to force a response from my opponent, right? I'll keep the Crew's OC for later. So what I do is I put my Crutox Rider here with its 7-inch move and scout and everything to establish Locus. Barely within 6 of the center. I feel like this measurement's a little off, but anyway, the way where he had it, he was within 6 of the center, just barely. I think our terrain might have been a little off, but regardless. Excuse me, drinking some water there. Regardless, I put him there to establish Locus. And I think this is a mistake because my opponent naturally hid from me going second on Purge the Foe, and so I didn't score my 4 points for kill something on turn 1, which is totally fine. But by putting the Crutox Rider here, sure, I score 2 points off Established Locus, but I give him a target, and not only that, he's able to bring out his JPIs with their 12-inch move to here, shoot and charge and kill this Crutox Rider, score his 4 points, and then fall back onto this objective. So I ultimately sort of just gave up 2 points in a Crutox Rider for no reason, because my opponent, to deny me this primary, would have had to either bring out Lionel Johnson, who's deployed here, or those JPIs. And I don't think you put out Lionel Johnson ahead of your whole team on turn 1. Maybe you do. Actually, in hindsight, maybe that is the play. I can't put my Riptides into him because he's only T9 and with possible dev wounds, but regardless, that's, obviously not the line my opponent chose. And so I sort of just gave up 2 points in a Crutox Rider for a response that was always being forced regardless. So I that was a bit of a mistake right there. And ultimately my opponent does obviously deny that 4-point swing. So now I'm actually down a theoretical 12 on primary. I need to start making that up, right? And immediately I do, because as we go into turn 2, things get a little wild. So first of all, I make another mistake. I bring out my fire knives, and I'm like, bet, I'm going to kill this unit. Easy money, right? But I drew Secure No Man's Land on turn 2. So I say also, all right, this Crude Carnivore unit that I brought back behind this wall, let's just advance them onto the objective again. Seems reasonable enough. But this is Gladius Task Force. My opponent is able to use the reactive move stratagem in Gladius Task Force to move these jump pack intercessors. He rolls a 5, which is pretty lucky, but he moves them back behind, this terrain feature, which is a mistake on my part, because now my fire knives are just hanging out here, and how am I going to kill this JPI unit now? I need them dead, because not only did I draw Overwhelming Force, which they are still an Overwhelming Force, even though they've reactive moved off the objective, but I need to get my 4 points for killing something. I need to also deny my opponent from getting 4 points for kill more, because these Kroot in the middle of the board here, as I draw my Ks everywhere, I should always expect them to die, right? And so if I kill nothing, my opponent kills one thing, that's 4 points for them, and also 4 points for kill more because I've killed nothing. So these JPIs become a 12-point kill, and I need to now reveal more of my army than I would prefer to be able to kill them. So I have to bring out both my Riptides like this, and now this has no target and cannot fire and fade. Fortunately, I did kill the JPIs with my Riptide. This guy fire and fades back behind the wall. This dude is like fairly well hidden, and like all is well. My opponent didn't really have the ranged shooting with the repulsor like all the way back here. Even if he brings it up, he just doesn't have the range on the Hellblasters to reach my fire knives. So I ultimately didn't get punished too hard for this play, but that was another mistake. You're always supposed to proc reactive moves first before you do any of your other movement. And so that's something I definitely need to do a better job of, and a mistake I made right there. Now, my opponent immediately makes a counter mistake on the bottom of turn 2. Like I said, I've got my Kroot on the objective right here. Once again, now he's lost his jump pack intercessors. He needs to bring out a second unit to answer this Kroot problem. And I've positioned them more on like this side of the objective such that the Deathwing Knights that are staging up like here aren't really that close and don't want to like roll the dice on a dicey charge because they only move 5, right? So he brings up the repulsor, but naturally doesn't want to just get out all of his Hellblasters and the repulsor to kill a unit of Kroot, right? Because the repulsors, the Hellblasters, if they get out, they're probably going to die to my fire knives. I would happily just drop my fire knives like in the middle of the board and probably trade out with that unit, as long as I don't like have to bring out too much more, because then I can like fire and fade them somewhere, and like that's a really bad trade for my opponent, right? So he only fires the repulsor into the Kroot. Y'all, they're stealth. He only kills 5. They're also saving on 5s against the Lazare, right? Because I got cover. Yeah, he only kills 5. I don't even have to take a battle shock. And so you know how I was saying I was in a position where I needed to kill my opponent's dinky thing in the middle to make sure I don't give up, kill more? Yeah, so my opponent failed to kill something on turn 2, also failed to prevent me from killing more, and gave me hold more on the top of turn 3, which was a massive swing in points, a 12-point swing in points that was given up by not killing these Kroot. So all of a sudden, the ball is in my court to potentially play for a win. And I say potentially because, again, still have to respect the bottom of 5 burst scoring, the 16 that is likely to come out from Dark Angels, but that is a really rough position to be in. Not only that, Scout Marines did containment, like here and here, something like that. I think, they were here. As in cover as they could be, but obviously not fully in cover. And I was able to use my Flamers and my Fire Knives to trade with my opponent's Scout Marines. So now I've killed their 5-mana jump pack intercessors. I've killed both of their Scout Marine units, and I'm up 12 points. They have no scoring left. They are entering the bottom of turn 3. Obviously, my opponent recognizes it is time to go, and they declare Assault Doctrine and their DWKs, their Deathwing Knights that have been staging here and here. They decide it's time to get into the mix. And so, advance and charge, my opponent crashes into my stealth suits and pathfinders and Kroot that I had, like staging up all over here. Storms my hostile objective in the center, Lionel Johnson waddles his way all the way up onto my opponent's natural to sort of serve as a second wave. And the Inceptors and the Eradicators come in and clear my Flamers. And that is my opponent's go turn on the bottom of turn 3. Did manage to kill more units than me on that turn because, like, all of this bullshit kind of died, right? And, like, I had only killed 2 units. I had killed the Scout Marines, whereas my opponent kills 3, the Kroot, the Stealth Suits, and the Crisis unit. But that's just sort of the plight of playing against Dark Angels in Purge the Foe, right? I'm attritioning their resources very well, but they just have more things to kill. So makes up for on primary right there. Unfortunately for my opponent, on the big go turn, I don't think they swung hard enough. On my clap back on the top of turn 4, I was able to full clear this unit of Deathwing Knights with both of my Riptides and the DACA Commander contributing their shots. I also, for the Deathwing Knights that were now here, I brought in my big Sunforge Bomb and dealt exactly half of the squad's wounds and damage. I killed 2 and also did 2 damage to another one. I was out of Melta range too, by the way, so I got very lucky with my damage rolls. And I, not only that, I was able, there was one here. There was something like that. I was able to hold on to my home on the top of turn 5 when the Deathwing Knights and Lionel Johnson continued to crash through at my lines, which was absolutely huge. I cleared the Eradicators with my Fire Knives as well. I got the Inceptors down to 1 wound remaining. There was 1 guy left after, I don't even remember what happened, but there was 1 guy left. I think I overwatched them. And I threw a grenade at them with Kroot. The grenade only did 1 damage. I shot everything at the Inceptor, and they also only did 1 damage. He lived on 1 wound. That was a little sad. I think, I would have, obviously I was hoping that the grenade would just deal with him. And with this Deathwing Knight not dying, I only actually killed 2 units on the top of turn 4, so my opponent got kill more again on the bottom of 4. But by that point, they had just completely run out of resources. I finished off this unit, top of 5. Azrael and co. Had cleared a unit of Kroot to get him the kill more on turn 4. That was the decision that got him there. Piled into my Fire Knives that were here. But he paid to sticky this. But I was able to kill Azrael and co. back. And we can take a look at the scoreboard. I actually was able to kill more on turn 5 to get a 12 and deny Ben the 16, which is another really big play. And I got my draw, 88 to 87 in singles terms. A crazy game. Ben was an awesome opponent. We had so much fun playing against each other. That man just clearly enjoys Warhammer, and I respect the hell out of that. Yeah, I had such a great time. Small mistake. I think I was supposed to get an 11 by virtue of I just fully forgot that I drew Bring It Down on turn 3. His only vehicle was the Repulsor, and then he also had Lionel Johnson. I made the business decision that it's not worth me selling out with my Sunforges to kill this vehicle that has a scary unit inside that's going to kill me back for 2 points. It's just not worth it because at this point, like I said, on turn 3, I knew I could just kill a Scout Marines and have him attritioned of scoring resources. Why not just continue to hang back? And so that was what I did, right? So yeah, I just can, I obviously deep striked my suits. I think I deep striked my Sunforges here, and then I rapided my Sunforges here, right? So I obviously still brought everything in, but yeah, I didn't need to sell out to kill this Repulsor, so I just chose not to. And then yeah, I think that was basically everything that happened in that game that was sorry, one more important thing. So you know how I said these Deathwing Knights were beating on me with Lionel Johnson? So first of all, I put my whole Sunforge bomb into Lionel Johnson on the top of turn 4, or maybe it's top of 5, whenever. And yeah, that motherfucker just ate it up. Took no damage. 3-up invuln's crazy. So I left this unit with 7 wounds remaining. 1 guy's alive on 3, 1 guy is at full. And I had a stealth unit down here. And they did 7 wounds to the Deathwing Knights. They finished them off on the top of turn 5. I threw a grenade. even through the Fort Feel No Pain, he took 2 mortal wounds. The burst cannons knocked off the last wound on that guy, and then I got the Melta through the invuln, rolled a 6 on the damage, and killed the last Deathwing Knight. It was the coolest thing I have ever seen stealth suits do. That stealth suit, Shots Foray, definitely going to get a name because that was so awesome, doing 7 wounds to Deathwing Knights. But yeah, I ended up getting the draw that I wanted. It was a super, super fun game, a super close game, a really helpful game to get me some information about the Dark Angels matchup. I do think it is not a super winnable matchup for Tau. I will say, if it was not Purge the Foe, I would have won this game harder. I think it would have been like a 12 just by virtue of like my opponent abandoned objectives to run up the board at me on turn 3. I think getting him off of this, and then if there was any incentive for me to deep strike here and deny and get rid of the sticky, I would have taken it, but it just sort of didn't matter, so I never went for it because he was always going to control one of this, that, this, that, or that on turn 3, 4, and 5, right? So it just never made sense for me. But I think if it was a different primary, I probably get a little bit more of a win. But regardless, it's a very drawable matchup, though. I think Tau has a lot of agency to play into this one. The DACA commander, very important into the Deathwing Knights. I do think my ability to ignore one of the units of the Deathwing Knights by virtue of Riptides not really dying to them is very, very important. And so I kind of ignored one of the bricks a little bit, said, hey, I'm just going to make sure I hold my home. I don't need to worry about the units that are down here. I'm going to clear out everything else. That was a really great luxury to have. Because the DACA commander can only be in one place at a time, right? So, yeah. Shout out Ben for a really great game. And that's going to do it. For the after action report, do I think this list is the meta? No. Do I think this is the best list to bring to your singles GTs? Not necessarily. But I think it actually has a lot of play. I thought Double Sunforge, jury's still out for me. I did think the Riptides were very good. I loved having Double Kroot Carnivores. And I think more than anything, this just goes to show that Riptides are very playable. They're still a really solid data sheet. And I recommend it for any Tau player wondering what to bring. Consider Riptides. They're still a great, great unit in Retaliation Cadre. Stay tuned, though, for my next video that's coming up about anti-tank data sheets. I'll also continue walking you guys through my competitive journey. That's always going to be the goal of this channel. I'm definitely back in on Warhammer. CTC, California Team Championship, mid-March. I'm getting prepared for it. If you're going to CTC, let me know. Maybe we can say hi, grab a practice game. Would be fun. But yeah, thank you all so much for the support. And until next time, have a great day, everyone.